then right then you talk about
Exactly. So I'll probably start now. Welcome to Bellingham Voices. My name's Marie Marchand. I'm your host. October is Domestic Violence Awareness and Action Month. And to discuss this issue, we have two guests today. Susan Marks is Executive Director of the Bellingham Whatcom County Commission Against Domestic Violence, and Linda Quinn is a commission member and also Superintendent of Ferndale Public Schools. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you.
And Susan, we'll start with you and see if we can lay the groundwork by providing a definition of domestic violence.
Yes, domestic violence, it's the use of one person using tactics of abuse and control against another person in a relationship. And when we think of domestic violence, I think a lot of us have a picture of that. We have the picture of probably a woman, black eye, maybe a broken bone, some unexplained bruises, usually making an excuse for those bruises, and that is definitely a part of domestic violence. It includes that kind of physical abuse. It also includes, more commonly, emotional and verbal abuse, ongoing, a pattern every day of harming someone with your words, with your actions, with the way you treat them. It includes things like controlling finances, stalking someone, sending them a lot of unwanted texts or emails, showing up unwanted at different places that they're going, giving them gifts that they don't want. And it also, in this day and age, includes a lot of use of technology to follow someone, to check up on someone. Maybe you're reading their emails or reading their private Facebook posts. So it's kind of that whole spectrum of abuse that you use against a partner to try to control them, take their freedom away, and have them be what you want them to be instead of being who they are as a whole person.
I like that definition because I agree with you that society has a narrow view of what domestic violence is, and there's a lot of different behaviors that can fall into your definition of it.
Right.
What's the difference between the Domestic Violence Commission and the DVSAS organization?
Great. So the DV Commission, we are a joint City of Bellingham, Whatcom County formed commission, and we were formed in 1998, and we were formed with the role of providing leadership in the way our community as a whole responds to domestic violence. So we're looking at really that big picture. And DVSAS, Domestic Violence Sexual Assault Services, they are a nonprofit organization who've been around since the 70s, and they provide primarily the ground level direct services to people who are experiencing domestic violence. So we are really very complementary in our roles. We work together very closely and are working at both responding to the domestic violence that happens currently and preventing it from happening in the future. And we do that through a lot of work with systems, policy, training, doing research and bringing new programs, collecting data and evaluation on programs we have. So really trying to make sure that when someone does come forward because they're experiencing domestic violence or because they're perpetrating domestic violence or their child in that home, that they are receiving the best possible response that they can from whoever they tell, whether that's police, an advocate, a counselor at school, a neighbor, someone in their church. We want to make sure all of those people are prepared to respond to that person, and we want to prevent it from happening in the future. So that's really our role, is that big, broad picture of ending domestic violence.
I noticed that you've recently revamped your website.
Yes, we did.
It's pretty amazing, and there's lots of good information on there, and there's some startling statistics. One that I found was that 20% of local 13 and 14-year-olds have reported that their friends have experienced dating violence. That's startling to me, and we'll talk a little bit in a few minutes with Linda about children and the impact of domestic violence. Another statistic on your site is that 59% of the homicides in Whatcom County over the past 6 years have been intimate partner violence related.
Correct.
And it made me think of the recent fatalities that our community has had. So I'm wondering if your commission convenes any sort of committee after there's a fatality to understand that, to analyze it and see maybe where the system could have stepped in earlier to prevent it, or at least to learn from it to help prevent future incidents.
Yeah, definitely. And it's unfortunate, since in the last 6 years that you cited, Whatcom County has had a really high rate of domestic violence homicides. It's unusual for a county of our size to have as many as we've had. And a lot of our law enforcement and prosecutors will say that they do not see very many homicides that are not related to domestic violence. That's just really an encompassing problem, and it is a problem that leads sometimes to someone killing someone else. When there is a homicide, it's partly because of that number. We have, in the past 6 years, looked at 4 different cases and reviewed them from a systemic point of view. One thing we know is that when there's a homicide, anyone who's connected looks automatically back in their own interaction with that family. So that kind of individual level happens automatically every person in the system who is connected with the victim, the perpetrator, the child, goes through their memories, their files, their records, and says, did I do something or could I have done something differently? So we bring together all of those people to say, what could we have done together differently? Is there a new program? We've actually brought in new programs to try to end domestic violence homicide in Whatcom County recently that we have just started, all of them within the past year. We will also look at maybe providing more resources for DVSAS to provide more advocacy for victims who are at high risk. And we'll look at how we can communicate better, because a lot of what we find is if we were communicating better with each other, we might have been able to identify problems and provide more support. And so we just are taking this really broad look back to try to figure out what can we do in the future. What we found overwhelmingly for cases we looked at is that all of the victims were doing a lot of different things to try to be safe and keep their families safe. And it's not enough if our community doesn't support that victim. And we found that children generally know something that's going on in the family, and our community needs to be providing those children support so that they can be safe and heal from what they're watching at home. And that all of we knew this before, but it's so clear when you look at specific cases that it is the offender, it is the abuser who made a choice to take this action. And so we really need to improve how we hold that person accountable and support them to change their behavior. It doesn't help anyone for them to be abusive, not them, not their partner, not their children. So that's where our community is really moving, is trying to figure out how do we help hold that person accountable without letting go of the supports we have for victim and children.
I'm wondering about the partnerships that your organization has with other agencies.
Yeah, but we wouldn't be able to function if we didn't have our partnership with other agencies, and we wouldn't be able to accomplish anything if other agencies didn't come to the table. We have 28 members of our commission, and we also have many other people who serve on committees or work groups or projects who are not commission members. They do it as other part of their time. And so we'll partner with anyone who cares to make our community a better place and end domestic violence or address it when we can. It involves a lot of criminal justice personnel, law enforcement, prosecutors, courts. We partner with all of them throughout the county. Schools, child protection, youth serving organizations who work with children and youth. We also partner with social service agencies like the Community Service Office, housing providers, people who provide people with economic supports. So all of the places that perhaps victims, children, and perpetrators might be interacting, we partner with those agencies and help them have the education they need, the policies they need, the support they need to provide the response that they need for those families.
And one exciting partnership that you've recently started is with the Ferndale School District. And would you like to talk about that, Linda?
Sure. I've served as the superintendent representative on the commission for 6 years, starting my 7th year, and through that have benefited from the education and the interactions that Susan just talked about. But it's actually been 4 years ago now. We applied together for a grant from the Department of Justice, and were selected as one of 9 sites in the country to receive a grant to work with youth in secondary schools, in middle schools and high schools, to prevent domestic violence and dating violence and sexual assault, harassment, stalking. And it's been an exciting project. We've worked with changing policies in the schools. We've always done some things to try to prevent this. Obviously, as educators, we know kids can't learn if they're involved in unhealthy relationships, whether it's their own or their parents. But this grant has allowed us to get very systematic in our response. So it's we've started with changing policies. We've provided training to all staff who might be first responders to children who come forward or young adults who come forward. We've started youth groups. We've been training kids on what healthy relationships look like, although we wish it weren't so. Some of our students don't have role models for healthy relationships. So we're talking to them about the fact that they deserve a healthy relationship even if they've not been part of one in the past, and helping them to know what that means. That it's not okay for the boy you like to tell you you can't be friends with anyone else, or to take your cell phone, and it's not okay to have those kind of control and power issues. And we're helping, we're we're helping boys too understand, because it generally is boys, it's not exclusive, but boys understand how they can be strong members of a relationship without maybe some negative power things going on. You want to?
And it starts that early, is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think we know that, and that's why all the work we're doing on the Domestic Violence Commission and all the work of DVSAS would be great to be out of business.
Love to be out of business, yes.
But the only way that's going to happen is if we change behaviors, starting with kids at the very beginning of those kinds of relationships that they, and that starts when they're in junior high, thinking about them anyway.
What sorts of impacts does domestic violence have on students that young?
Well, we are an academic organization. I mean, and we spend lots of time improving, our teachers spend a lot of time improving their instructional skills and making sure we have the right curriculum and doing frequent monitoring of monitoring of academic progress, and none of that makes one bit of difference if kids aren't ready to learn. If kids are feeling unsafe at home or at school, or if it doesn't matter how good we are at the academic side of things. And so it's critical that we address barriers to learning if we're going to achieve our primary mission of making sure students achieve to high academic standards.
Well, thank you for doing this work, both of you. It's very, very important. How can people get in touch with the commission?
There's, you mentioned our new website. We have a new website, so for people who are online and have access online, they could come to our website. We have contact information there. It's at dvcommission.org, so DV is in domestic violence, COMMISSION.org. Also, they could call us, 360-312-5700, and call my extension, and we could talk about how they could get involved. There are lots of opportunities for people. We have different work groups that are working, some specific to the Ferndale School District, some for other issues related to children, youth, some are working on our criminal justice response, and some are working on our community outreach. So we have different committees that people can be involved in. And then in October, it's a special time we're asking people to be very involved. It's National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which in Whatcom County, we have decided to change the awareness to action. We think people know in general that domestic violence exists. We don't want to see it. We don't see all of its impacts in our community, but we know it's there, and we know we don't find that acceptable in relationships. And so we think it's time for people to take an action to prevent it. So in October, we are having 31 days of action, one action every day, and we are asking every single community member to follow those actions and to take action. So we will be doing all sorts across the spectrum. So there will be simple things where you can learn more about domestic violence. You can watch a TED Talk, you can read an article. We're going to have a documentary screening at the Pickford. We have resources for everything that we ask people to do. So there's a TED Talk, you will go directly to that link. If there's an article or a website you can learn more from, you will go directly to that link. And then we'll ask people to do something in your interpersonal relationships. So talk to someone that you care about a healthy relationship. Often a young person, and we have tools for that. How can you talk to a child in your life about healthy relationships at any age? That can start very young. You can talk to kids about what it's like to be healthy and have control of your body and treat other people's bodies correctly. Up to teenagers, certainly an important time to be talking about relationships. Or talk to a friend, family member, coworker about their relationship and what's healthy and what's unhealthy and how to make the unhealthy parts healthier. And then we ask people to take an action in the community. And there are things like we have policies that you can ask your workplace to implement. We have policies you can take to your school and ask your school to implement, guidelines you can take to your faith community and ask them to pilot in their faith community. So we have, and for everything, again, we have a specific resource. So you will never just get, ask your faith community to address domestic violence. You'll get, here's this resource, take this to your pastor and talk about what domestic violence looks in your faith community and how they can partner with the DV Commission and DVSAS and other agencies to address it. So everything comes with a direct resource and a really specific way to take an action that day. And at the end of 31 days, if everyone in Whatcom County did that, I think we would be a much healthier community. We would have reduced the likelihood of future domestic violence, made it a safer place for victims when they come forward, and made it a more supportive place for abusers to know that they need to change and to get that change. So that's our goal. And anyone can get connected to that through our website, through our Facebook page or Twitter. And for people who, again, aren't connected online, they can call us, and we have posters and calendars that we can send them, and so they can just follow it, hang it on their wall at their workplace, in their lunchroom, or at their house, and follow that throughout the month.
Great. It's very important work that you both do. And I know that the City of Bellingham supports financially a portion of your budget. So
Yes.
I'm really happy about that. Well, thank you again for joining us. We appreciate it. And thanks for joining us to view Bellingham Voices. And we'll see you next time.